Okay guys, October 31st is here. And while most people know that day as Halloween, for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's a day to note for an even more important reason. It's the day to commemorate Charles Taze Russell, the founder of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, Russell died on Halloween back in 1916, 104 years ago. So, with that in mind, here are my 5 top tips to commemorate Charles Taze Russell this Halloween. I'm probably stating the obvious here, but clearly the first step in any good commemoration of Charles Taze Russell is to make a Roman toga out of a bedsheet. And why is that? Because just hours before he died, Russell made his own bedsheet toga. How do we know that? Well, Joseph Rutherford was Russell's successor as president of the Watchtower Society, and in Rutherford's funeral talk for Russell, he gives us the scoop. The December 1st, 1916 Watchtower has the talk transcripts of all 17 talks given at Russell's funeral. Notice Rutherford's on page 6012. He tells us, 7 hours before his death, addressing his traveling companion, Brother Menta Sturgeon, he said, "Make me a Roman toga." Using the bed sheets, Brother Sturgeon made a toga, which Brother Russell put on himself. He stood erect for a moment, and then, laying down on the couch in his Pullman drawing room, closed his eyes, thus in symbolic language speaking of death. A great deal of the Bible is written in symbolic language, and it was quite appropriate that he should speak his last message in symbols. Now, what was Russell trying to tell us by putting on a bedsheet toga? Rutherford goes on to interpret these actions. He said, by wearing the toga, Brother Russell in effect said, "I have fought the good fight. I have triumphed, and shall be received as a member of the royal family of heaven." Well, I think there is no greater honor we can render to Russell than by wearing our own bedsheet togas. What caused Russell's death is not universally agreed upon. For example, in an obituary the New York Times published just hours after Russell's death, they cited heart disease as the cause. However, Watchtower publications point to a different cause of death, cystitis. In another of the 17 talks given at Russell's funeral, his traveling companion, Menta Sturgeon, describes Russell's health 7 days before his death. Again in the December 1st, 1916 Watchtower, page 6002, he said, "His overworked body began to break at its weakest point. Cystitis was becoming acute." On that final speaking tour, Russell had to take frequent breaks during talks he would give. This is behavior very consistent with cystitis. Cystitis is essentially a urinary tract infection that has been left untreated and has traveled up to the bladder. In the 1975 yearbook, page 78, we read that on Tuesday evening, October 24th, at San Antonio, Texas, Russell delivered his last public talk on the subject, "The World on Fire." During this discourse, he had to leave the platform 3 times while his secretary filled in for him. The book, The Finished Mystery, published the following year in 1917 by the Watchtower Society, gives us further information on Russell's cause of death. On page 58, we read, during the last 8 days of his life, he had appointments in California, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and New York. And though for several days manifestly dying with cystitis caused by excessive travel and speaking, he declined to cancel any engagements and went out of this life October 31st, 1916, on a railroad train en route to his Kansas appointment. And so, the number 2 way to commemorate Charles Taze Russell: prevent urinary tract infections. Drink lots of fluids. While cranberry juice is not a cure-all, there has been shown to be some benefits. And ladies, always wipe front to back. You know what I'm saying. A very common practice at witness assemblies for the first half of Jehovah's Witness history, now all but forgotten, was a specific ritual that they would frequently perform. In this ritual at the assemblies, the speaker would pull out a handkerchief and would wave it to the audience, and the audience would all pull out their handkerchiefs and wave them back to him. It was called the Chautauqua Salute, named after Chautauqua Institution, a noted center for learning and religious studies at that time in history. For example, in one of the many convention reports that the Society published annually back at that time, the 1910 issue describes a convention in 1910 in England, which Russell had traveled to give talks there. It tells us on page 50, the friends decided to adopt the American form of greeting. And so the chairman announced that as Brother Russell came to the platform, they should arise and give him the Chautauqua Salute. It goes on to describe the ceremony, saying, the congregation arising and waving their handkerchiefs to the speaker, he responding in a similar manner. Various Watchtower references describe the Chautauqua Salute continuing under the presidency of Rutherford, as well as the Society's third president, Nathan Knorr. But the practice has evidently died out by the time of the 1970s, and we find no references mentioning Fred Franz, the fourth president, getting the Chautauqua Salute. Interestingly, Mormons have almost always had the identical custom at their assemblies, and they still perform it periodically today, as seen in this clip from a 2020 General Conference earlier this year.
Hosanna! 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 To God and the Lamb! Hosanna! Hosanna! To God and the Lamb! Amen! And amen! And amen!
In the March 15, 1908 Watchtower, page 86, the Society initially published reports of an amazing new strain of wheat with incredible yield, dubbed miracle wheat. The October 1st issue, page 291, had a follow-up article under the subheading, More Miracle Wheat. Notably, this article said, but he, the grower, refuses to sell any of it until he has secured a fair stock, which will be in a few years hence. Well, the Watchtower mentioned this miracle wheat once in 1909 and 3 times in 1910 issues as an example of what God would do on the earth under the millennial reign of Christ that was expected by the Bible students imminently. But then, towards the end of 1910, an exciting article appeared in the Watchtower magazine. The October 1st issue, page 4689, reported that several Bible students had been able to obtain a few grains of miracle wheat and had grown it themselves with miraculous results. John Bonet, who was a prominent Bible student of the era and who Rutherford would later appoint to the Society's board of directors in 1917, reported that he had been able to sell the resulting crops for $1 per pound at a time when a bushel of wheat, 60 pounds, was selling for just $1. Truly amazing results. 6 months later, an even more exciting article appeared in the June 15, 1911 issue of the Watchtower, page 4844. It said that John Bonet was willing to sell a little bit of his miracle wheat to fellow Bible students for just $1 per pound, again, 60 times the going rate for wheat at that time, and he would donate the proceeds to the Society. It was an extraordinary price, but just 2 months later, an update was published in the August 1st issue, page 4866, under the title Miracle Wheat in Demand, which essentially advised Watchtower readers to act now because it's selling fast. Well, the Brooklyn Eagle, which was the local newspaper where Watchtower headquarters was located in New York City, began to start covering the miracle wheat story that year in 1911. For some odd reason, it took a rather skeptical view of these seemingly miraculous claims. Eventually, the U.S. Post Office inspectors got involved because these amazing claims of this wheat for sale were being made in a publication traveling through the U.S. mail system. Russell sued the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper for libel, but unfortunately lost the case when a government inspector testified that during testing, the miracle wheat had turned out to score rather low on their tests. So tip number 4, have a bowl of Wheaties or some cream of wheat. See if anything miraculous happens for you. Russell loved the pyramids in Egypt, specifically the Great Pyramid in Giza. For him, the Bible was God's written word, but certain prophecies could only be understood when combined with God's stone witness, the Great Pyramid in Giza. He taught that the length of various passageways within the pyramid corresponded to time periods in Bible prophecy. It was only by combining God's written word, the Bible, with the Great Pyramid that the Bible could fully be understood. His first book in the series, later called Studies in the Scriptures, was titled The Divine Plan of the Ages as Shown in the Great Pyramid, with the pyramid prominently featured on the cover. The first chapter is titled The Testimony of God's Stone Witness and Prophet, the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Russell regularly took trips into various parts of the world to spread the message of the Bible students, and often these trips included stops in Egypt to visit the pyramids. Just one example is in the 1910 convention report. It describes Russell and Rutherford, along with the rest of their traveling party, touring the Great Pyramid for several hours. We see photos here that the group took at the site of the pyramids. And a few pages later, we have a nice photo of the entire group a few days later in Jerusalem, with Russell and Rutherford here clearly visible. So, tip number 5 to commemorate Russell: once things calm down with the pandemic and it's really safe to travel again, take a trip to check out those pyramids. Don't forget your tape measure. Well, I hope you like these 5 tips to commemorate Charles Taze Russell this Halloween. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have some cranberry juice and cream of wheat to attend to. Goodbye.